Hello and welcome to BookBeat. Today we will meet the afternoon adult book group of the Maple Grove Library. The group will discuss The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diefenbaugh. Before the discussion, Sharon Bannett, an original member of the group, will be joining me to tell us about the book club's origins and how the book club operates. Enjoy the show today. And now, the afternoon adult book group at the Maple Grove Library. Good afternoon and welcome to BookBeat. Today we are interviewing Sharon Bannett from the Adult Afternoon Book Club of the Maple Grove Library. Sharon, welcome. And we also have Mary Fenske, who is a member of the book club. And we will be talking particularly to Sharon today. But I hope, Mary, if you've got things to add, you will.
Sure.
You will add as well.
Okay.
The main question that I have is, what are the origins of the book club?
We started this book club because a friend of ours wanted an afternoon book club. And there wasn't currently one, and we were meeting in the evening and decided it would be a good time to start an afternoon book club. Unfortunately, she didn't stay with us very long.
Oh dear, but the book club,
Well,
how long?
we decided, because this was our first book that we read, was The Shell Collector by Anthony Doerr, and that's kind of how we dated it. It was copyrighted in 2003.
Oh, very interesting. Does your group have a set of ground rules, or is there anything governing your group that helps it hold together?
Well, yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. I wouldn't say, I was thinking about that. We really don't have any ground rules, but we always say we are always going to talk about the book. If you haven't finished the book, that's okay, come, but we're going to talk about the whole book, so we're probably going to spoil the ending for you. You know, you don't have to come. It's very optional. We just have sort of a core group of 10 to 15 women. At this point, it's all women, although we're open to everyone, that come, and we take turns being the facilitator. And so usually whoever has chosen the book is the person that then kind of leads the group in questions. But it's a very welcoming atmosphere, and you know, people join in. If they don't want to say anything, though, that's just fine. There's no rule about that. Let's see, what else, Sharon?
Well, I was going to say, in the beginning, Mary was the facilitator, and that was good. I enjoyed that a lot because I really don't like to lead, but now we're all taking turns, and that works well.
Excellent. That's very interesting, and that gets to the next question. How are your books chosen?
Well, I can start off. The end of the year, usually October, November, we start talking about books for the year, for the upcoming year. And people throw out ideas, and we usually have, 15 or 20, more than a year's worth. And then we winnow them down a little bit and make our choices. So we know for the year what 11 books we're going to read. And I say 11 because in December we don't meet with a book. In December we go out to lunch.
That's important.
Oh, that sounds great. Who can belong to the book club?
Anybody is welcome. I think, the library has it on their website, and when we met at Barnes & Noble, they had it in their newsletter, so therefore it was open for anybody to come. Occasionally a man has joined us, but almost not ever.
Yeah.
It tends to be
It tends to be women.
Okay.
And so often, this is just kind of interesting, so often people will come and they'll say, you know, I just retired and I was looking for a book group. And so we must appeal, an afternoon book group just sort of appeals to that demographic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And occasionally we'll bring a friend if
Oh,
we have
sure.
somebody who is just retired or they just decided they wanted to join it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had children, grandchildren, and
Yeah.
this is wonderful. It's good to have, you know, all sorts of different perspectives.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think you've covered what format the book discussion takes, that the person leading the book club, the book is the one who chose it. Is that correct?
Generally,
Generally.
although not always, but generally.
Yeah. Or sometimes, you know, somebody will choose a couple of books or they know they're going to be on vacation or I don't know, you know.
Right.
So it's general.
It's, do you have suggestions for people who might be starting a book club?
I don't know, I think you just have to find a group of friends or a group of interested book readers and then decide where you want to meet and then just go ahead.
Yeah. You know, and maybe that you're kind of like-minded with books. We always talk about the books. People will come sometimes too and say, I've been in book groups, and gosh, it was more about the treats and the snacks and that sort of thing. With the exception of our very important December lunch, we are about the books. And we kind of read widely. We read fiction and nonfiction, biography, and maybe some groups would rather delve into mysteries or historical fiction, or they have a particular genre.
Right.
And so those are people then that should get together, the like-minded. But another thing people often say is, gosh, I never would have read this, if you hadn't brought it up. And I appreciate that. It's opened my eyes to, whatever the topic might be. So that's something people appreciate here. And when you think about your book group, I suppose you should think about that. Do you want to expand?
Or do you want to read the same kind
Yeah,
of things over and over
whatever.
again?
But know that, yeah.
Yeah. Any way is an okay way.
Yeah.
But this sounds like a really interesting kind of format that you read widely and read deeply of different subjects. Is there anything else you'd like to add, either of you?
I don't know. Originally, we didn't meet here. We met at Barnes and Noble.
Right.
And then we moved here.
How did you get connected with the library?
Well, yeah, Barnes & Noble is having kind of a change of direction and didn't have the space for us. And one of our members is a friend of the Maple Grove Library.
Right.
And so she made the connection. And the library's been very good to us. They have a number of meeting rooms and you can sign up for them, but usually, you can only sign like 3 months in advance or something.
Okay.
You'd have to check that on their website. But the Friends of the Library is sponsoring us, so we are guaranteed this room, or guaranteed a space, I guess I should say, the second Wednesday of the month when we meet.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, and and like Sharon mentioned, they publicize us on the website. They're very accommodating.
And we don't serve lunch. I mean, that isn't a part of our,
Yeah,
Right. The real purpose, as you said, was the book.
yeah. Well, I think it's, people that like to read often like to talk about what they read, and that's...
and sometimes you
that's what
come
we're
and
about.
you didn't like that book.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you
Yeah.
start liking it.
Yeah. People bring up things,
There
yes.
comes one of our members.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much.
Okay.
Language of flowers. I thought very odd combination of topics put together. Loving flowers, understanding flowers, and a tragic foster child trying to find happiness and love in her life. I did go online, and I think everything online that I found was also written in the book, all of the questions, her interview, and everything. So you probably have all read the same thing I had. This is her first novel, and her education was in creative writing and education, and she was teaching art and writing to youth in the low-income communities. And she herself has been a foster mother, and I guess that's kind of how she kind of wanted to try the two things together. Some of the praise things that were written at the very front of the book, they kind of really hit. One of them was, it's a beautiful book about an ugly subject. And I really don't know that I know that much about the foster care system other than what you see on TV, that there's a lot of things that go on in the foster system, as with everywhere, I'm sure. But some lovely things that come out of it too. But I think you hear more of the sensational stories of children abused and things like that. Another one was devastating story and hopeful, but surprisingly real. And that's the part where it kind of hurt to think that there are children out there like that who are so struggling for love. And it is a portrayal of frailty and the hardness of the human spirit, that she could come back and make something of her life at the end. Victoria, the main subject, was very interesting to me, how there were two sides of her character, how she was tough and distrustful and angry, but she had the capacity to be gentle with her flowers and so forth. So I thought, all in all, it was a good story. It ended nicely. I don't like them when they don't. So. A couple of the questions that were in the back of the book that were in part of the interview, one was about the blue room or the closet, and that's where I'd like you to tell me. I didn't get that part at all. Why did she live in a closet? What was she just hiding, or what do you think that?
Well, to me, I took it as being kind of a safe room. I mean, she didn't intend to live in a closet, but when she saw it, she didn't back away from it. She kind of embraced it and stayed there for a long, long time. And it was almost like being in a womb, where you had, it was confining and low and soft with the rug and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of, that's how I interpreted it, as her safe place.
And also it was something that she could afford. I mean, she was given the opportunity to live in this room. And I think she did feel safe there.
There also wasn't a lot of room for other people. And, she wanted an alone space, I think, and so that served the purpose.
Well, and when you think where she had been, sleeping in that garden under the bushes, this
Yeah,
was...
at that point, any room would have looked
Yeah. You want to say it was warm and dry, and yet when she came in and was soaking wet, it was wet in there forever. Also, it didn't dry out, so...
Yeah, I wondered how they actually cleaned it or kept it clean. I mean, they never talked about that. I mean, she'd come in, she'd be wet or whatever. How did they clean that room?
But when she lived in the garden for all that period of time, in the city garden, well, that's like, it's homeless. I mean, I can't imagine how they try and keep themselves clean or change clothes or anything. I mean,
Even when she was in the foster care system, in the one room, she had planted plants in the carpeting.
Yeah.
well, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so, she was very comfortable in any kind of situation, I think.
Anything you guys want to in specific talk about? Another thing I wanted to talk about was, they asked a question in the back in the discussion. She was often hungry and malnourished in her life, but food ends up meaning more than just nutrition to her. So, but is that like, did she feel like she was making friends over food, or
The food was love.
food was
Maybe.
love?
Food was care. If somebody's feeding you, they're taking care of you, and she rarely felt taken care of.
I always wondered how she could eat so much.
I know.
It was like she would eat all of everything.
Right, and never got fat.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just not right.
It's not fair. Of course, now she was young. Was gonna catch up with her.
I want to think how long she went between meals sometimes, too.
That's right.
But she was never really secure about food. I mean, even at the very end, when Grant made her that chicken, the last few pages, she tore through a couple chicken legs, just gobbling them up so quickly. She didn't savor or enjoy, really. He talks about how he'd be cooking something, he had to have appetizers or something because she
She was so hungry, she needed something before the meal started.
Yeah, well, there was that. She was hungry, but she couldn't count on having food, or she never learned to really count on it, even when she was doing pretty well.
Many people that have gone hungry are always afraid that's going to happen again. And
Yeah.
I've read books where foster children have hoarded food and hid in the closet and things. In case they get moved again, they want to be sure that they have that food with them.
Yeah.
Because
So
of
it's a real
conditioning,
fear.
I think. It's a conditioning, and then you're always, when you have it, you're eating it, and when you don't, you don't have it.
Boy, when you mention that, I'm thinking of that kid's book, Heidi. Wasn't she hoarding the rolls, and she had a whole bunch of rolls that
The
she...
kids' book, Heidi, I really can't remember that one.
Oh, okay, well,
Our daughter was 3, and when we got her, she had not been fed on a regular basis. So she didn't know if there would be meal number 3 or not, whatever.
Yeah.
So she would eat a lot at breakfast, and then she would eat some at lunch. And then after maybe a year, there's always going to be 3 meals. But it took her a long time to grasp that there would be food another time.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that was a conditioning that she just couldn't forget. That would always be there, that fear of not having food.
Yeah, some years.
Did you guys have a hard time at all going back and forth between Elizabeth and the present? I did at first.
Some of the time, yeah. I thought it was difficult because you didn't really know who they were talking about
Right.
there for a while.
Then I kind of got the hang of it or something.
Later in the book.
Sometimes it seems like you have to catch the rhythm. Authors go back and forth in time periods and between people, and until I get into the book and catch the rhythm, sometimes I have to backtrack a little bit to catch up on what's actually going on. I
It
didn't
didn't
think it
feel
was too
choppy,
bad.
though. I felt that there was always a transition at the end of one chapter to the beginning of the next. and
Yeah,
It flowed.
yeah, I thought it was good.
I thought the first part of the book flowed better than the middle of the book. Towards the middle of the book, I guess it was like, well, come on now, let's make a decision or do something. I felt she was dragging her feet, so I don't know if it was because of the writing or what, but I thought it kind of bogged down because I was like, oh, this is a really good book, didn't want to put it down at the beginning, but then... So I don't know, did anybody else feel that way, or was that just me?
Well, I don't know about the bogging down, but I had trouble reading the Elizabeth sections because as loving as and trying so hard as Elizabeth was, you knew it was not going to end well because they'd already,
Right. You got
gone
hints.
to the, part where she was emancipated and she had been in a group home. So obviously something happened with Elizabeth. And I don't know, I just was waiting for that boom to fall, I think.
Right, it was kind of dread factor there,
Yeah.
I'm gonna read something
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Some of the fire was on the first page, I think, when she said, I'm always doomed to fire.
That's right, that's right, yeah.
I agree with you though a little bit. I think the switching back and forth
was a little bit difficult because after a while we got the backstory. And then there was so much more of the current story that we needed that I think they had to stretch it a bit. And I would have liked a little more of Elizabeth's backstory if they could have filled in with that a little earlier, I think.
For me, it was a little confusing with Elizabeth and her sister.
Right.
You know, what was the real issue?
What was the mystery, right?
Yeah, the mystery and what was going on with
I
that.
agree.
And it wasn't clear for a long time in the book.
Well, and I didn't quite understand why she waited until the day of the adoption to back out.
How cruel.
Oh, yes.
I guess she thought something was going to happen with her sister Catherine, that they were going to, I mean, she tried or thought she was trying to get together with her. And she just, it didn't ever work out, and somehow that distracted her. But I don't know why she backed out.
Good, I wasn't the only one that didn't get it.
I love the learning about flowers. I was in Trader Joe's today and I'm like, oh God, this is whatever. Did you guys know all that stuff?
No, each flower seems to have a story.
Yeah.
I never thought about that either. I just, oh, they're pretty, they smell good, you know.
But we just had an anniversary and my husband brought me some flowers and they were the right color. And I knew that.
So you checked it out.
You picked the right color.
But you checked it out?
Pardon me?
You checked it out after
Well, no, I
reading
had, because I had already read the book. I read the book quite a while ago.
Oh, okay.
But then when he brought me flowers, I said, well, you picked the right color, because he always brings me roses, but he likes white or yellow. And I thought, oh, it'll be interesting to see what he brings, but he brought red.
See, I've always loved yellow roses. I think it's because I grew up in Texas.
And is there that?
But I'm like, oh, I'm screwed now.
I agree.
Dennis always brings me yellow roses, so. I know that.
Well, that's what I had for my wedding, and we've been married, it'll be 45 years, so they can't always be accurate.
Right. We can kind of put our own definition on if it's a memory attached to it, I guess.
Well, I think she found a lot of definitions the more she looked.
Mm-hmm.
The more resources she got into, she found different definitions for different flowers.
Well, but the part I didn't get is that she studied all the flowers and what it meant. And she would talk to some of the clients that came in. Do you think they really gave a hoot about whether it was a miniature white blossom or yellow or what? Because if she did those arrangements for me, would it make a difference? I mean, now I can understand it.
Well, I don't think it made a difference until she explained it.
Well, I know,
Then it made a difference.
then it
But
would
you're right, other than.
take a whole chapter to explain it to me.
Right.
I mean, if I get a flower, I'm so pleased.
Right.
But that's how she was promoting her business. Her business
That's
dealt
true.
with this. I mean, it was called, what was it?
Messages.
Yeah,
Well, these are
messages.
awesome
So
varieties.
therefore, that was important.
Well, and I found it interesting to read this, because I just thought, oh my God, all this minutiae over these flowers.
But that was her life.
That was her life.
That was her life, and that brought meaning for her. That was love, that was how she able to be secure.
And I would recommend to somebody, hey, I think you'd enjoy this book. It was different.
I did that after reading this book when my grandchildren bought me my little bouquet of dandelions. I had a little thought about it, and it was just because I read the book, and although there was no meaning I knew of dandelions, to me it was filled with love, you know, so.
And that's actually in here, dandelion, rustic oracle. I think
Yeah.
that was wonderful.
Maybe we'll all think more about the flowers we pick or plant or give or receive and check it out if we have the book.
But they confided problems to her too when they came in to buy the flowers. So they were leaving with hope plus flowers. I mean, she offered some sort of a
She
method
spent
to
a lot of
resolve
time with
things.
them in the beginning, you know, when they first came in. And she said she wouldn't do their wedding if for some reason they didn't do what she wanted them to.
She was kind of consular in a sense.
Exactly.
Customer service.
Mary and I were at a dinner with young women on Saturday night and brought up this book, meaning mid-30s, and they loved it. And one particularly said what she really liked about it, and it resonated with me, was she liked the way the author used language.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, yeah, I felt that way too. But these young women really loved the book.
It's just not just an old lady.
I just can't imagine young women, though, waiting a week to see what flower someone was holding to get her next message. I mean, now it's like text.
Yeah.
So Victorian texting was time consuming, but I think that was part of the beautiful part of it, at least for me when I read it, is the anticipation. I get to anticipate what the next flower is going to be or what the next message is going to be, as opposed to some little text.
One thing that I was kind of confused by is when she first met Grant, she was of the opinion that each flower had a single meaning. And then later on she found out that there were multiple meanings and she had to go through all these dictionaries until she could resolve it in her own mind, which was the correct one. Why was that so important to her, that there'd be one meaning for each flower?
But it was a little relationship growth too. I mean, they sort of negotiated the meanings. She won most of the time, but they were negotiating in the same way that you'd build your little dance with a partner. And I liked that part a lot, where she came to the conclusion that there wasn't just one meaning.
But don't you think at the end with every flower she came to the conclusion this was the meaning that she believed was the correct one?
When she finally wrote her own dictionary, yes, we all have to dictionary.
I think that the author said something about that too. In studying of the flowers, she said that sometimes there were many meanings, but sometimes she had to just pick the one she liked the best.
Okay.
In this context. So.
What do you guys think about Meredith, the caseworker?
I think she was well-meaning at the beginning of their relationship. And then I think you just probably get so frustrated and you just put up with so much and you can't take any more. I mean, that's kind of how I sort of thought she got it.
I thought she burned out on her.
Yeah. And maybe she thought, well, I'm keeping her on until she's emancipated, and that's what I'm doing here, and I'm not doing anything more.
Well, she even had the opportunity to not have her, and she insisted on keeping her because she was kind of like a mission, you know.
Didn't she want to not chalk her up as a failure? She wanted to see it through, she didn't want to fail.
Right, she didn't want to fail. Whether that was the best thing to do or not, I don't think it was the best thing to do.
Not when she wasn't giving it her all, actually.
Right. But then she would turn around and do things. I mean, she would stop and feed her, and because she knew that's what she needed. And so I had kind of a love-hate relationship with her.
I would like to have seen her come back in at the end after Victoria was successful.
Yeah.
To have one final meeting.
Yeah.
To kind of resolve things.
Right, yeah.
But I would guess a lot of those caseworkers never know how it ends.
That's true.
Yeah, sure.
And I would guess a lot of them burn out,
I would think so.
because that's a pretty heavy load that they carry.
Yeah. You know, there are people here that worked in education. Is there anybody that worked in social services? Did you, and if so, did you find this true to life, or did it ring true, or was it too sensational, or? No, but nobody's.
Well, I was the foster child. I had foster children. I served on a foster board for 10 years. A lot of it rang true, but the social workers we dealt with did see them to the end. They went as far as to make sure these kids could go on to college. They made sure they did the money. So this is a group we work with now. You know, it wasn't always perfect, but you know, these kids live. I mean, they are one, you know, phone call away from being out of a home. You know, you did this. We never had the right to say, okay, you spilled the ink and getting rid of you. With our own children, these kids, that's what happens, and they can go on the smallest little things, you know, and you live like that, and that insecurity, and I'm sure you don't overcome that insecurity with the best social worker in the world, so. Anyway.
I think county social workers are really overworked. They have caseloads that are humongous, and I think it's hard for them to have time for individual, other than to just try to keep things as settled as possible.
Well, many of my students went through a lot of trauma that she did, not as extensive for so many years, but it affects them for the rest of their lives. I think when we think about what she went through all of her life, and the fact she found one thing that would help her get through it and where she could find love, it was really magnificent that she was able to come around with all she had been through, with all the abuse and the foster home care. And at first you thought, well, Elizabeth was kind to her. Why was she so mean? But she just wasn't used to it. She didn't know how to handle care and love. It took her a long time.
Well, the aspect too of how Victoria was educated. I mean, she didn't go to school. She hated school.
Well, no, she had Elizabeth finally homeschooled her.
Right, so she homeschooled her. I mean, I thought that was a great example of homeschool, using what's in your environment to really teach, you know, the language and the spelling. And she used the flowers as a way to educate her.
But they didn't say what happened to her when she went back to the group home, you know. Then how about her schooling, you know? What did she do? Was she forced to go to school? I don't know.
Well, she was so poorly treated.
Yeah.
And that's true with at-risk students. If they're not in one class, then they're kind of looked down upon by everybody else, and they have to get in for a lot of at-risk behaviors, or they're shunned. And of course, she had reading problems, and it was difficult. She was lucky that Elizabeth took her on.
And she was also lucky that Renata took her on as a worker because she needed a job or something to maintain her after she was released from the group home.
Well, and she was also lucky that Grant kept the baby.
She was. I mean, she was lucky in a lot of ways. I mean, and, you know, even in the end, we can't say she was totally successful because it hadn't been totally worked out. But she was coming around.
One of the themes of the book was the idea of forgiveness and second chances. Talking about her starting the fire and some of the things she did. And they asked, do you think a person deserves that many chances? Because it sounds like she had quite a few. So I don't know. That fire was pretty attention-getting, I thought. So.
She didn't mean for it to get so out of control, though. When she did start it, she just thought it'd be a little fire, kind of a little attention getter, and it did get out of control, so I don't think she really meant it to be that way.
And they didn't talk a whole lot about how Catherine all of a sudden decided that she was kind of confessing to this fire, and she had nothing to do with the fire, as far as I know.
Other than the fact that she had thought about doing it the same way.
Yeah. But it sounded like Catherine was kind of delusional.
I think she was.
Sure what was reality and what was...
Yeah, she was mentally ill. She probably did believe she started it.
Yeah.
The fire.
And I think everybody else sort of believed it too. Grant was an amazing person in that he really was patient and kind and took her in and took her back without much question.
Took care of his mother all those years.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't know too many men that I think might be that forgiving, and I guess I know a couple, but not a lot.
Well, he gave up his bed, I mean, so she could sleep in the house that he was sleeping in, so she could sleep in there and have the door locked and the whole business, so she would feel safe. And he did that for a long time before she finally let him in the door.
And having this baby all by herself was kind of awful. Seems she would have turned to somebody at that time.
She didn't know too much what to do with it after she got it. I was really nervous there for
Yeah.
This is not going to end very good at all.
Yeah, and we knew that as readers, and yet Mama Ruby kept telling her, you're doing great, and
Yeah.
kind of backed away, and why didn't she see that Victoria was floundering?
And it should have been pretty obvious that the fact that she had no home life herself, she had no way of understanding how to be a mother. There was no way she could be expected to know what to do.
Yeah.
She seemed so naive about the whole pregnancy thing, the whole birth process, and and the baby coming in that. It was like she just didn't have a clue. I kind of thought, how's this poor baby going to survive?
Well, we grow up seeing our siblings born or being part of a family, and you see how those things, that you learn it by osmosis or something, and boy,
Yeah,
it sounds like she didn't
yeah.
have that. She
No,
had nothing.
nothing.
And if she was lacking in some of her education, not going to school and just some of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
When she grew up with such a feeling of inadequacy herself, that any situation, she always felt that she was going to ruin it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the way that she felt about the baby, too, is that she could love the baby as much as she could possibly love her, but she was still eventually going to hurt her, because that was what she always did. She always believed that every situation she was in, she was going to end up hurting people.
Yet the difference between her and Grant with the baby, he went and found somebody that could help him and that knew about babies, where she just kind of floundered around on her own so much.
But then she did the same thing
Yeah,
that
then
he
she did, but she just dumped the baby, where he kind of like made arrangements more, so that he was still in the picture.
But he realized, but he said the same thing, I couldn't do it on my
No.
own. And that's what she was, I couldn't do it on my own. So then he went to someone that he knew.
But she didn't reach out to Grant and say, let's do it together, or will you help me? She just, like Betty Jo said, just, here you go. Well, surprise.
Yeah.
She didn't know how to ask for help.
Well, she did though. I mean, she knew how to ask for help in her business. She knew to get help there. And she even knew how to turn it over to Marlena. And, I think this though is the complexity of people. That people can do something in one part of their life and they're just unable to in another part. So
She has so much rejection though in her life that maybe asking, she just thought, what's the point? In the foster care and the love of people. And then, going to be adopted in the last day you're dumped and going from foster, that there's that rejection so that you don't ask after a while because it just seems pointless. But in her business, it was different from her emotional life.
And it's one thing to ask for love, to ask for support, and you're thinking, what are you going to get in return? On the other hand, the business was kind of a gold mine. The money was it was so successful. She knew she was setting Marlena up, and
sometimes I think even with our own children, you don't see that success right away. And with an infant, sometimes there isn't the success.
No.
Baby cried, she didn't know exactly when to feed the infant, all those kinds of things. So she wasn't really sure she was doing it right to begin with, I don't think.
And I don't think she could ask for things for herself because she really didn't feel that she deserved anything. Whereas the business, it was more of a giving thing.
That's right. That's an important point, isn't it? Yeah. She was asking and as opposed to giving something away. Yeah. One thing about the business, when you talk, Cindy, about, I look at the grocery store flowers, these just sounded like works of art where she would put things together and wind them around, and, they were just so unbelievably gorgeous. And yet she knew Marlena couldn't do that, but Marlena could do the message, and she thought that was the most important part, as opposed to these spectacularly beautiful arrangements. That's what I was drawn to, but she was thinking it's all in the message. I don't know, I just find that interesting. And
Flowers don't last for long. You know, within a few days, they're gone, but the message can endure.
And she was an artist. I think that's part of it. The other girl was able to arrange flowers and do it, but hers were a work of art. I think that's, I mean, I can paint, but it's not, I'm not an artist, but I love to paint.
But Renata noticed this right off.
She did.
When
She
she
picked right up
saw
on
her,
it.
she knew she wasn't clean and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but she took her on because she could see this talent.
I thought it was interesting too when she took that bouquet that she picked from the stuff that she planted. And she's, this is, what did she say? This is
my evidence.
This is my evidence. I can do this. You know. Wow. My experience is what she said. This is my experience. You have any experience? No. And she went and she did this bouquet. There it is.
Was
Did
her
we know
like
when-
going on a job interview and you're showing your strong points? This was her PowerPoint presentation.
Jay, did we know in the prep of this why she chose to write about flowers or how this idea for this came about?
I don't remember.
I don't either.
I thought she had a book or something about flowers that she got interested in. I can't remember.
And this is her first book, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
They started as two separate ideas that she wanted to write about the foster care system. And she started a nonprofit now, and I found a picture of her. She has an adopted foster child and 2 current foster kids. I just thought it was really neat. But I was trying to find the exact thing. One of the things she says is she was at a dinner party and they were talking about flowers and different things. And someone brought up that moss grows without roots. And she had been referring to moss about maternal love. And her friend said, I love that because it's the only plant that grows without roots. And she said, I knew instantly that this concept would form the end of my book. The idea that moss, maternal love, grows without roots, separate from everything around it, felt freeing to me, almost revolutionary. Victoria believes that the love she has for her daughter is not enough, not because she was not loved, she cannot love. It is a belief in our society that we mother as we have been mothered, that both love and abuse pass through generations like plants draw water from the ground. But the truth is that love, like moss, is self-contained. It draws neither from our past nor our future. It is separate even from those we love. It projects out but stays whole within itself and does not attach. When we look at love this way, it is possible to see that we are all capable of loving our children deeply and completely, regardless of our past or circumstances. I'm going to cry. When I found that, I thought, I'm going to print that out. Because to me, then everything going backwards is... I love this. I'm sorry, I went on and on and on, didn't I?
No, it's a nice quote.
Let's see. The novel touches on many themes: love, family, forgiveness, second chances. What do you think is the most important? What did you think was ultimately the book's lesson?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last part.
What did you think was ultimately the book's lesson?
Well, I like the idea of the power of forgiveness.
Yeah.
That we're all flawed, we all need forgiveness, we're all capable of giving forgiveness. And to me, that kind of was wound throughout the entire book.
And forgive yourself. I mean, it's...
Forgive yourself is the most important thing.
Most important. But yeah, forgive those who have injured you or hurt you. I think so too. I agree with you.
The other thing is, I think that we're all lovable, that there's a beauty and a wonder in each one of us. And I think that's really important, that she was, broken in so many ways, but she was still lovable.
I thought also the ability to move forward. Because she could have hung on to any aspect of her life, any period, which were tough times, and stuck there. But she moved forward throughout her life.
I agree. I think it was a survivor's tale. She could simply have bailed out and gone into forever and ever. And yet, when I came to that part about, was it very early on where she had the plants right in the carpeting and plants right in the room, I knew it was going to be a successful survival thing, because they always say that that if you plant a garden, you're not going to be depressed because it's a forward-thinking action, right? You're waiting for those things to bloom or to ripen or whatever it is. And it's funny, I was in a garden store while I was reading this book, and there was a T-shirt and it said, "Gardening is better than therapy, and you get tomatoes." And I thought, I'm so sorry I didn't buy the T-shirt, but it all struck home with me while I was in the middle of this book, and I think she found her way out, and that's no easy task after abuse of any kind.
It seemed like there was something innately in her, because this wasn't something that she could see or plan. She just had an innate ability to overcome somehow. I mean, she had to for it to keep going, because I don't think she had the...
She didn't have a lot of tools. But she
right,
had that, right?
Tools, exactly.
One thing that I noticed in the book that I kind of thought about was there's so much in life we take for granted, and if we come from a home where our parents loved us and our siblings loved us and we get married and there's love, you just take that for granted. And then you read this about somebody that is so lacking in that, and it's just almost hard to think about it.
I think another thing too, and it comes kind of from that, having it in your background, is trust. I mean, she had to learn to trust people.
Right.
And she couldn't trust Elizabeth, and she couldn't trust Grant because she didn't know how to trust anybody. So as she learned how to do that, I think that's why she was able to give Grant the baby, because she learned that she could trust. He fed her regularly. But I think that was a big thing in her life. I liked the survivorship business. One of my favorite books growing up was always The Boxcar Kids, because of that very concept that you have nothing and you work and you find something and you build on it. And so when her story of the flowers and the store and making a success, that was like the good part of the book. I like that.
Did anyone see the recent accident that happened in Minneapolis where the young man drove through the fence and into the Mississippi River?
Yeah.
I was just reading that today, and he was a foster child that had been taken in by a fairly well-to-do family in Prior Lake, like when he was 17, and he'd been through over 20 foster homes, and they supported him, and he mastered his drug addiction. He was a student at Northwestern, and he was going in his senior year, would have been this year. And after a night of, I just thought of this book when I was reading the article about how close she always came, to perishing, that survivorship. And I loved Boxcar Children too. That was one of my favorites. How close we are to losing everything at any moment. And these kids who go through that, to even have college and support and love and a really stable family, that, it can turn on a dime, that all of a sudden you revert to self-loathing and destructive.
It's hard to erase the earlier years.
Yeah.
They're very formative.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very tough. Yeah, at first with the articles, you didn't realize that all this other was in his past.
Right, right, he seemed as though he would have been a very,
Yeah.
right. But I really admired her all the more that I found myself not liking her at times, that I just kind of wanted to, you know, maybe she needs, I don't know, to be locked in her room for a few hours. But she just, I don't know, that survivability, that wanting, you know, that she did find shelter, she didn't seek out, you know, she didn't lay down on a highway or something like that when she was avoiding a very, you know, typical existence when she went out into the woods of this park. You know, that she was always kind of creating a shelter for herself, that somehow she had that will to survive. I think I just liked her as a character.
How'd she end up in foster care? Do we know that?
Wasn't she in it from the beginning?
Yeah.
They
I
said,
think
they
so.
said,
I think she was abandoned, it
Yeah,
sounded like.
right.
There were-
The name on her birth certificate was a number, didn't they say?
Well, they didn't know who her
Yeah.
parents were, or they didn't seem to, and she didn't.
Didn't know her birthday.
Yeah.
It shows resilience, that we are a very resilient people. And some of us survive and some don't, some crack under it, but
In the interview that the author does with this other author, right, I'm not sure, they talk about the children who've been abandoned or in foster care, they suffer from an attachment disorder. And they have thought that it was not reversible, but then the author says that there have been some studies where they find that these kids, young adults, can be turned around when they have the proper love and support and so forth. So I think that, well, that's good. They're not.
Goes back to love doesn't conquer all. You can have a really good foster parent, but if you're not connecting, you know, and if this child comes with so much baggage you can't overcome it, I mean, the best foster parents can't do it, you know. And we all like to think, oh, we'll love them and we'll do this, but it's not necessarily the answer.
Well, I think they've discovered that when they were bringing the children over from Romania and some Russian children, that we just couldn't love them enough to get over their backgrounds.
I think sometimes, I don't know if you'd call it the character of the child or what, but I have two sons that are 3 years apart. If you told one he couldn't do anything right, he'd say, oh well, so what? And if you told the other one he couldn't do anything right, he'd say, I show you. And if you give one a gold star, he'd do anything for you. If you give the other one, he could care less. And I mean, my approach to raising them had been completely different. And that's just the way they were. And yet they were in the same environment and, you know, the same loving household. And they were just very different in how they handled things. So I don't know how much we're born with and how much is with our environment, but I kind of sometimes think that comes into play. I know there's been a lot of controversy about it and discussions.
I know when my son and his wife adopted 2 little girls from China, and they have a wonderful program where they tell them how to do it and what to do when you bring them home, and they really recommended that no one else really get involved with their life. I mean, Grandma and Grandpa, we just could hardly wait to get our hands on that new baby and everything. And I think one of them was 11 and one was like 13 months old when they brought the 2 little girls home at 2 different times. But they really said, no, they just need to stay with you, Mom and Dad, you're the ones that are there and supporting them all the time. And then they'll open it up maybe to the grandparents and then the aunts and the uncles. Well, I'm telling you, these 2 little kids are just wonderful, but they really followed the rules and they just really, you know, wanted it to go right. And you could see how it worked because they really bonded with Dan and Chris, and they're, you know.
There didn't seem to be much rules in the foster care that she was in. It was just kind of like she was floundering around trying to figure out what to do.
Well, and I have been into some foster homes, and some of them are just wonderful, and others aren't. It's very sad to say. You think, after leaving, I was in early childhood education. Why is this a person, a foster parent? Why are they leaving all these little children with this woman who is in her 70s and can hardly get off the couch and keeps them in infant seats? And you think, this isn't a good place, but it's the best.
They can have, people aren't standing in line to do it.
I know.
And as they get older, they come with more baggage and.
I know,
problems and-
and you see this, I mean, I did multiple home visits, and it's amazing, because you don't know what to expect when you walk into a home.
I thought about our last book, The Book Thief. Another girl raised in a foster situation that had found two very loving parents.
Right, very different situation.
She had known her mother, though.
True.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up, talk about?
I'd recommend it. I like this book.
I would too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book. I thought it was good. It was different than what we've read lately. And I don't know, it was...
Wasn't a war story.
It was. A lot of those.
Or fantasy.
Or fantasy, yeah.
It's unique. Yeah, I cared about the people.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today for Book Beat, featuring the afternoon adult book group at the Maple Grove Library. I look forward to the next time we will meet. See you then.